Time for another KrakCast Profile. This time we're talking about Mateusz Morawiecki. He's the Prime Minister of Poland, has been for almost 2 years now, I guess. And of course, that makes him part of any discussion about the Polish political scene. So, guys, where do we dive in on Mateusz Morawiecki?
Well, Mateusz Morawiecki, born 1968. So what is he now? 51 years old. Happy birthday to him.
Don't make me do maths.
He's been involved in politics relatively not that long, but his career is mainly finance and banking. But his main connection to politics is his father, who Kornel Morawiecki, who is actually a physicist, a theoretical physicist, got his degree in quantum physics. So
is there any cooler job title than theoretical physicist?
But he was involved with the anti-communist movements back in the 60s when he was still a student, or a PhD student. He protested the invasion of Czechoslovakia. Yes, supported them. He also started some of the first student unions and anti-communist unions in the late 70s. He got involved with Solidarność, started his own Solidarność called Solidarność Walcząca, so fighting Solidarność, even though he claimed they wanted non-violent means to be used. And one of their manifestos, among their manifestos, was that all satellite states of the Soviet Union should be completely free, and all nations that were part of the Soviet Union should also break off and form their own free nation. So he was going way past a lot of the other demands of other freedom fighters during that time. The government really didn't like him. He was arrested. He was sent to jail. He actually was able to disappear for a couple of years in Poland in the early 80s. They couldn't find him. They finally found him, I think, in 87. They sent a helicopter from Warsaw to arrest him.
What do you mean? Sorry, he disappeared, in the country?
In the country. They couldn't find him for a couple of years.
Wow.
And then he was arrested. For a year, he was held. And for medical reasons and the fact that the Polish government wanted to get rid of these people, he was allowed to leave Poland to Rome. But he was said, you can come back. As soon as he tried to come back to the airport in Warsaw, they took his passport and threw him back to Vienna. And then he snuck back into the country. And all this time, his son was involved in politics as well. Who was a teenager, he was helping him print out leaflets and flyers, getting arrested and beaten up by the secret police as well.
I was a little bit surprised when I read this, probably my own outside ignorance, really, about a year or two when he came into power, because there was a feeling I got that he was being pitched as the business guy going into politics. But, when you look into it, it's fair to say he's pretty much a royalty of the Revolution.
Yes, the funny thing is his dad, by a lot of people in Solidarność, or the anti-government movement at that time, really look up to him, though he didn't accomplish that much per se, especially later in the 90s. He ran for office a bunch of times, ran for president, didn't get enough votes.
But we're still talking about the father, yeah?
Still talking about the father, yeah. While his son started studying and going, Wrocław school.
Can I ask a question? Is it fair to say that he was kind of groomed from day one for a career in politics, far from a career in business? When you look at his education, his upbringing, his college years, his entry into business, it's all of these different committees and, these different faculties he's heading. And, it just seems like politicians always end up with this type of resume, where they're not they're not doing one thing, they're moving around a lot, master of nothing, maybe.
Well, I would definitely argue that he is a master of when it comes to financing and banking, but he was definitely involved with politics. We're talking about Mateusz now. Even in the late 90s, with councils and boards involved with the integration of Polish law before the accession into the European Union.
Oh, he's a super smart dude. I'm not saying he's not, he's really intelligent. When you see him interviewed as well, he comes across very well. He really makes his point in an elegant way.
But like I was saying, he's involved with all these universities, Hamburg University, Frankfurt University, Wrocław University.
A lot of universities in there.
He's everywhere.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. And he's got, MBA degrees, and then he, got into the banking sector in Poland. He started his own publishing companies as well that became popular. He co-authored a book on EU law, in his late 20s as well, one of the first books on the topic before Poland joined the EU. He was involved in a lot of these things.
I'm going to say he probably definitely didn't smoke weed when he was growing up.
No, he was more fastidious than any of us ever were, combined.
He was at the library on Friday nights, I think, or
John,
at least studying somewhere.
You see this in American politics a lot when people have he just listed all of these different things. Who has time to do all this? How is it possible?
Well, I think you're right when you say that. I think you said this anyway, that that it seems to be part of a maybe an overall plan. I mean, in other words, his position today is no mistake. Maybe, you know, at an early age, he had a good plan. He had a political background. Of course, the plan was to make some money first, and maybe to finance his political career, and you know, after that. But he clearly likes to stay busy. He's clearly very bright and ambitious. But he doesn't seem to me, start to go in a different direction, Dr. Mike. He doesn't seem to me so, how should I say? He doesn't seem as partisan as his family background would suggest. When you see your dad getting mistreated by the communist, I would expect some hardcore anti-communist warrior coming out. But Morawiecki has always struck me as more of a bureaucrat type than an ideological warrior.
Of a technocrat and a pragmatist.
Technocrat's a better word.
Technocrat's a better word, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that his feelings are probably in line with his father's to a lot of extent when it comes to these issues, but he can approach them more sensibly, more rationally. This might be kind of his weaknesses, that he built up probably a good network when it comes to banking and financing, and I think his career I don't think he was being groomed to be a politician per se. I think he was more interested in banking and financing, and that's where he got a lot of his experience, a lot of his networking. And he was brought on. He actually was involved with Donald Tusk's government back in, I think it was 2010. Donald Tusk brought him in for a committee on economic policies, and Morawiecki was part of that group for about 2 years. So, you know, this guy was on both sides of the table, both sides of politics from a long time. People brought him in because he was an expert in his field.
Yeah, WBK was where he really made his name, wasn't it? And in fairness, he did spend a long time running that bank. You know, it seems like he was a key figure there, and he exercised good stewardship. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it was. He entered the bank as a deputy at a lower rank in some department, and he rose up through the ranks until he became the head of the bank in, I think it was 2007. Mm-hmm. And he basically led that bank while it merged with another one, became WBK to became a major player on the Polish scene. He was involved with charities. He was involved with like sponsoring different cultural events. Like in Poland, I think there was a Czas Honoru. There was like this Polish TV show about Polish freedom fighters during World War II. They helped fund that as well, and the bank really grew in that time.
Interesting side note, AIB, the Allied Irish Bank, bought 16% of WBK in 1996 or 1995, and were forced to sell it because that was nationalised after our financial crash, and then we had to sell that stake, which ended up being a mistake because it's gone on to appreciate significantly.
Actually, this is another little fact that I came across. He was actually an honorary Irish consul in Poland for several years before he became prime minister as well. So,
is that right?
Yes, I couldn't figure out how that happened.
Why didn't you say that before we recorded this? I could have checked that shit out. I could have ran it through the Irish Mafia network and found out what's going on here. I'm going straight down to the pub after this.
Do we know anything about his net worth? Morawiecki's?
That's an excellent question.
Let's put it this way. When he was working in the banks, he was easily earning six figures, if not seven figures per year.
Euros.
Yeah. But, you know, the guy...
He's a multimillionaire, I think, at least.
He's a multimillionaire, and, you know, not a millionaire that he was like, you know, shady deals, but, you know, working at a bank as the head and being...
What do you think about the disconnect between him being extremely financially successful, having this background in finance and banking, and heading what is typically described as a populist political party? Is there any kind of, you know...
Well, a lot of people argue that he's the rational part of the party of peace, that he's actually the one who tries to bring in the policies that will be able to pay for all these populists, you know, handing out money. So, you know, Plan Morawiecki was about, you know, economic growth and this like rational, responsible way to increase economic stimulation. So, you know, about taxation, closing VAT loopholes.
They never shut up about that, don't they?
They never do, because they were successful. The thing is, they were successful with it. They were right about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, you know, they're going to brag about it as long as they can.
I think it's also fair to say that no matter how much longer his political career lasts, he still has a lot of money in front of him. This is not the kind of guy who's going to sit in front of the TV when his prime ministership is over. He's going to go back to work somewhere.
And this introduces a worry I have because, you know, look, I wouldn't vote for peace anyway, but if you were going to have him or Shobro in power, you'd much rather have Morawiecki with his hand on the wheel.
Oh, yeah.
So my question to you, Mikey, is if it came down to a battle between the two, leaving out, well, maybe we'll cover the recent news headlines and bring that in as well, but if it came down to the battle of the two, is the fact that he's wealthy and he has a huge career in banking or international statesmanship waiting for him actually a disadvantage that he won't have the stomach for the fight?
You know what? I'm really not sure who would win in a fight, those two. Morawiecki seems like the better choice rationally, but a lot of people emotionally are detached from him. I was surprised when a family friend of ours, when, you know, I was over for Sunday dinner at my parents' house, and they had some friends over, and we were talking politics, and I was surprised at saying that how much they don't like Morawiecki because he seems detached, lizard-like, completely emotionless.
I happen to agree. Now, just I'm going to point out very quickly, one of our previous guests a couple of months ago, Matthew Terman, he was here, and after we finished recording, we were talking about this very subject, how Morawiecki doesn't seem to have that human touch, really, like maybe Duda has. And Terman assured, and he should know, he knows Morawiecki privately, he assures us that Morawiecki is a good guy and all the rest of it, and I believe him. But at the same time, in Morawiecki's media public persona, he does have this distant, icy kind of
I
touch
thought
to
that
him.
until I seen a couple of hour-long feature interviews that he did in English, and I couldn't believe how well he came across, to be honest with you. I thought he is a very, very impressive guy in person.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
The lizard-like thing is it's just something when you capture a still photo of him, there's this kind of weird look he has, like, kind of eyes narrowing,
His
focused.
tongue flicking out, licking his lips quickly.
I mean, John, like he was even in the U.S. for a while. Like you probably caught that. What were your impressions of him?
Of
Morawiecki, yeah.
when he was in the U.S.?
Yeah. It's like he was in like some universities there and stuff like that as well, like speaking.
I didn't see him when he was there. I was here. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, saw him as an American watching the U.S. press and stuff like that.
Can I totally avoid your question and say something else that I was looking at?
Go ahead.
Look, I just Googled Mateusz Morawiecki and went to images. And in the first page, there's roughly 20 pictures, and there are 2 of him smiling.
Yeah, he's not.
He looks like a mannequin in the rest of them. He just doesn't, and his smile looks very forced and pained, and like he's thinking, okay, can I stop smiling now? He's just, and again, this shouldn't matter, but in the world of politics, his approachability, his human qualities do matter. And I compare that again to Andrzej Duda, who, whatever you might think of his politics, I think we have to agree that he does have that neighborly, friendly uncle, approachable feel to him, doesn't he? And Morawiecki definitely does not.
Morawiecki does not. Morawiecki is very well spoken, and
Yes.
This is what you've always been talking about, that in the foreign press, he comes across quite well. And this was actually something that was used against him by one of his main rivals in peace. So
Why would they used against him?
You with your fancy talk.
It was used against him in the fact that at this time, Poland, when Morawiecki became prime minister, was, in the news. There was a lot of negative stuff about peace, but all of a sudden, there's this new prime minister. He seems to be quite popular. He's, showing up in different countries. And then Ziobro all of a sudden drops the whole Holocaust law. And that becomes news number one. That was the law, basically, if our listeners remember, where there would be a new law saying that if anybody claimed that Poles as a nation, as a group, were partly responsible for the Holocaust that helped bring about the death of millions of people, that there would be legal action against them. And, this was very negative press while Morawiecki was out there.
You would never invite Ziobro to a party, would you?
No, you
He's
wouldn't.
just not that kind of guy.
And and all of a sudden Morawiecki's out there and he has to respond and he has to protect his minister, who he is actually in opposition to, and has to apologize for him and cover his own ass and well, yes, this is the policy of our government, but et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, all this good credit, all these good points that he was earning in the foreign press disappeared overnight.
Another interesting thing, and just to go back a little bit, that I think about him is he actually was part of the team that negotiated Poland's ascension to the EU. So I wonder how that plays with the kind of Eurosceptic wing within the right and the peace and politics. Is that another reason to suspect that he's
there's a lot of factors.
secret Donald Tusk?
And basically Morawiecki is the one who wants to keep the social programs at a minimum, make sure the economy grows well, and make sure that Poland is integrated with the EU. So he's definitely not part of the Eurosceptic group. I mean, he may be Eurosceptic in the sense, like a lot of people argue that the European Union has become too bureaucratic and too much of a who knows what the hell is going on situation. But
yeah, he does make in those interviews some legitimate criticisms of the EU, but in a measured and even way.
Let me just expand on something that Dave mentioned about Morawiecki in the media. And it's true that unlike any other Polish political figure, high-level political figure that I can think of, he seems comfortable and very, eloquent in his foreign media appearances. I saw him on, I think, CNN, somewhere talking about, the bond market and whatnot. And then the next day he's talking about, some piece of legislation. And, Duda, I'm not sure how good his English is, but I don't think it's that good. Shidwell, forget about it. Kaczynski, forget about it. Even Eva Kopacz, forget. I can't think of any other figure that is able to have a normal conversation with international media.
Does project confidence to the markets as well.
he really seems like he's the head of a CEO of a big company who knows what he's talking about. I just think he needs needs to lose the glasses. I have nothing against glasses. I've worn them before in my life, but they're like the boring kind of thick rimmed glasses that so many people seem to wear right now. And when I see him on TV, I need somebody to like mention or there has to be a banner at the bottom that this is the Prime Minister of Poland, because he just looks like basically everybody else right now. And, especially with his kind of lack of personality and not the greatest charisma in the world, he just like kind of blends into the background.
You would suggest a personality consultant, a makeover.
Yeah, something like that. And lose the glasses. I think Ziobro looks a lot less creepy now that he doesn't have glasses.
Can't see him being a great, people person either, though, Ziobro.
No,
Not really.
But Ziobro is the kind of person, he has personality, you might not like it, but he has it. And he evokes, say, strong feelings in lots of people. And that means a lot of people hate him, but a lot of people then love him. Morawiecki nobody really hates him, but nobody really loves him either.
Well, that's our take on Morawiecki. So, sorry, let me bottom line this. Thumbs up or thumbs down on Morawiecki?
Or
sideways.
I think I said that a second ago.
Yeah.
Sideways. Yeah.
Sideways?
I think he's the right person for the right. He's the right person in the right job. So definitely positive. But the way Polish politics works, that after the elections, he might be prime minister, he might not, because Kaczynski might decide that he'll be prime minister now that Morawiecki's played his role.
Glad you mentioned that. Very quickly, 30 seconds or less. I know we touched on this before in different discussions about this, but give us quickly the executive summary version of how Morawiecki even came into the office, knowing that Kaczynski's pulling the strings. Why Morawiecki? What did he have that got him in the chair?
Yeah, he just appointed out of nowhere in 2000.
Yeah, because he wasn't actually, he's not a member of parliament, in Poland.
Deputy Prime Minister, wasn't it?
Exactly. You can be brought in for official role if the government decides that you can be. So you can be a minister without actually being a member of parliament. And that's how Morawiecki came in. And Kaczynski, basically, the question is, like, his father was voted in through cookies. And then cookies threw out his father from their party, and he joined peace. And then the question was, like, did he help, bring in his son, like saying, like, oh, look, my son, he's got all these, connections. He's good at banking, and, so he brought in as deputy minister when it comes to development and finance. And then when Sidła had to go because Sidła didn't play nice with other EU members. And
probably ran them over in her car. Different subject.
Then Kaczynski realized he had to bring in somebody else, and there was a lot of people against Ziobro.
He's kind of a compromise candidate, really.
Yeah, he was a compromise candidate because basically, if it wasn't him, it would be Ziobro. And although Ziobro is very powerful with his networking, there are a lot of people that don't want Ziobro. So
I think that was more than 30 seconds.
Can I ask? We're only 17 minutes, so that's okay. Can I ask how powerful his father still is? Is that?
I wouldn't say he's very powerful. He's liked by a lot of people, even people in other parties, respected.
Has he got people's ear? You think he's got?
No, because he's kind of like crazy old man kind of thing right now.
War stories and vodka.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, there's our take on Mateusz Morawiecki. We've got, 2 more profiles to do from the political world.
We should have just done it on his dad. He sounds like a total dude.
Those are going to be coming up in the next, 6 weeks or so as we head into the October elections. So stay tuned for that. And, there's what you need to know in this KrakCast Profile. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Zdrowie to Cornell.